Today on an all-new Dr. Phil. Former 90210 star Annalyn McCord reveals her battle with dissociative identity disorder.
If all of this had to happen to me in order for me to sit here across from Dr. Phil.
Her diagnosis.
Was it freeing for you?
The invisible chains are gone. You know, this is it. This is me.
Her past struggles.
If anyone ever really knew who I was, I would never be loved.
Her private pain.
I was my 6-year-old self, my 8-year-old self, a 13-year-old self.
Are you coexisting with any of your alters as you sit in that chair today?
You just digged right in there, Dr. Phil.
A Dr. Phil TV exclusive.
Today, former 90210 and Nip Tuck star Annalyn McCord says she is uninterested in shame as she opens up about being diagnosed with dissociative identity disorder. This is a disorder that was formerly known as multiple personality disorder. It's just a new term that's now being used called DID, or dissociative identity disorder. Just last week, in a clip of Annalyn meeting with renowned brain expert Dr. Daniel Amen, she talks for the first time about her diagnosis.
I am absolutely uninterested in shame. There is nothing about my journey that I invite shame into anymore.
The actress and activist says childhood trauma caused her to develop a personality, Little Anna, and says it was her movie career that eventually led her to realize she had the disorder. Annalyn is bravely sharing her journey in an effort to destigmatize mental health issues. Here is her story. Thank you for being willing to talk about this. You know, one of the number one things on my agenda is to destigmatize mental health.
First of all, I appreciate the platform. You have dedicated your life to this, and I'm grateful to be able to come here and also to have a little platform, but where my voice is no longer silenced. And for those who are still struggling to find their voice, and maybe, you know, I think the biggest thing for me was the shame.
I loved one of your things that you were quoted as saying. You said you are uninterested in shame. And tell me the process you went through in deciding to be transparent about this.
I think a big part of it was getting to a certain point, and there's always this breakthrough point where I said, why am I here? Am I here to be an actress?
Right.
To hope that someone doesn't think I'm too crazy to be hired? Or maybe my life is about something altogether different, and maybe I was trying to fit in the box of actress, and I was never meant to stay in that box. Maybe I was meant to do something more. And for me, if all of this had to happen to me in order for me to sit here across from Dr. Phil and talk about this, and someone watching in their home right now says, oh, I thought that there was something intrinsically wrong with me and that I was damaged, and maybe there is a way out. If that's what my life is about, I am more than happy to step into that.
Was it freeing for you?
The invisible chains are gone. You know, this is it. This is me.
And I want people to know, you've been diagnosed with dissociative identity disorder, correct?
Yes, sir.
If they haven't heard dissociative identity disorder, we're talking about what most people in common parlance would call split personality or multiple personalities. And when did you first get that diagnosis?
So I went into PTSD treatment, and it was there that my memories of childhood sexual abuse that had been trapped in my mind for 25 years. And the bubble burst on those memories. And in the process of this, the splitting that I had kind of lived with in a more subtle, unconscious way became very apparent. And I also experienced co-consciousness, where I was me in my 31, 32, whatever, year it was, self, as well as my 6-year-old self, my 8-year-old self, a 13-year-old self would take the reins from me. And my 31-year-old self in my mind is like, I talk about a war inside your own mind. I literally couldn't get back to the more present, grounded, hopefully somewhat more mature self of the 30-something-year-old from the 13-year-old. You,
in fact, discovered that you were sexually abused, molested for a 6-year period in your life from 5 to like 11, right?
Yes, sir.
But this wasn't in your consciousness until 31. There's something called perceptual defense, where if there's something that overwhelms you, then our brain has the ability to put up a wall where we really don't perceive that. It's kind of like if someone is in a car wreck and they see their child go through a windshield or something horrible, and it's just more than they can process. They will actually put up a perceptual defense and have a functional blindness about that, and they won't remember seeing that, even though they saw it very clearly. And one of the coping mechanisms for some people is to create an altar that they can escape into while that's happening. Mm-hmm. And so that was in your history, but you didn't acknowledge it consciously until 31. When you look back now, can you see how it drove some of the personalities that you have lived with along the way?
Oh, absolutely. You know, my least favorite question on a red carpet as an actress was, what is your sense of style? Because one night I might want to wear leather and spikes, and
right.
Another night I'm wearing a tutu, and then I might be a little bohemian chick. And I was just like, you know, I dress for my moods. I didn't know how to even articulate the differences, but they felt like strong moods, but they were moods I'd be in for
right.
weeks at a time. A relationship would bring out a mood, mm-hmm. and I would be that mood until I was no longer with that person, and meet that person in a restaurant and I become that mood again. So because I had no awareness of this, and might have been a little bit of an arrogant little brat in my early 20s, I just thought there was something wrong with everybody else. And I was like, well, you guys are just, boring. I'm more interesting or something. Right. And I had this, of course, a defense mechanism, but I did always have the belief that if anyone ever really knew who I was, I would never be loved and I would always be alone. And so there was a part of me that knew that there was something up.
So there was always a mask.
Yes.
At some level, you knew if people really saw my personal truth, or they knew the ugly part of where I've been, they would reject me for sure.
Yeah.
Now,
hide at all costs.
You grew up in a religious family, and it was very rigid in terms of you didn't watch much TV, if ever. There wasn't like dating and this
Lord,
was like.
no.
Do you think, in retrospect, that failed to prepare you for some of the things that you were going to have to deal with?
I wish I'd met you.
Yeah.
I feel so seen in this moment. Absolutely. In September of 2002, I moved out on my own, financially, fully, independent.
This when you went to Miami?
This was when I went to Miami.
That's a big shift.
Yes. It was a little bit intense. I don't think it really hit me until my uncle actually drove a lot for work, and he drove me down and he helped me unload my little Rubbermaid tubs out on the side of the road. And I remember watching his taillights in that white truck driving off into the sunset, and I realized I'd always kind of felt I was alone, but I actually was alone now. And in no way was I prepared for what my life would become.
Was that a shock to your system?
I quickly found out that, you have to pay for things like toilet paper when you're on your own. Yeah. Money runs out really quickly. And I talked to my agency, and they were able to get me in there answering phones and saving money that way. So I started to have a little bit of structure immediately, where I had to go to a job every day, and they would let me go out for castings whenever I had to. So that did keep a little bit of distance between me and this wild world. But I was I was going to nightclubs at 15 years old. They weren't checking IDs then. I'm like, girls are doing, guys are giving girls cocaine, and all this stuff was happening in front of me. I never drank. I never did any drugs, anything. Actually, my first drink, I had a glass of wine on my 30th birthday. So I ended up, I think that was a saving grace for me. And I think it had to do with maybe one of those protective altars, I don't know, but was like, you will not be in an altered state of mind. You have to watch your back. And even though it wasn't going to tell me why I had to watch my back, the memories were off limits. I was very street smart, even for a kid who had been as sheltered as I was.
There's often an executive or an administrator type altar. Do you have you identified somebody that kind of runs the let's keep some order here?
Now, I have integrated these altars, and integration happened for me about 1.5 years into PTSD treatment.
3 years after you left, you were the victim of a sexual assault. What happened and how did that affect these altars and as a way of coping with that?
Coming up.
That was the hardest thing for me to cope with. It actually sent me deeper into disassociation, I believe, looking back in hindsight.
But it didn't trigger any of the childhood memories. It just drove you and them deeper.
Tomorrow, a parent's worst nightmare.
I think Stephen's girlfriend did it.
So you're basically accusing her of murder.
Was their baby shaken to death?
You believe she's going to let your son take the fall for it.
I would never do anything to hurt my own son.
That morning, she did not wake you up and tell you, I'm taking our baby to the hospital. I'm sorry, I cannot wrap my head around that.
That's tomorrow. Then on Monday, she gave all her savings to men she's never met.
He has $250,000 of your dollars, and you don't have anything to say to him? I have his phone number. Would you like to call him?
That's Monday. We now return to Dr. Phil's interview with 90210 star Anna Lynn McCord.
I underwent EMDR treatment, which is a treatment used for war veterans, and it's become popularized for victims of sexual abuse because when you're very little, your brain can completely just put it in a bubble and disappear it, and you become disassociative. And I experienced sexual assault and sexual abuses throughout my early teens. I left home at 15. Different things just kept coming my way. I talk about it very candidly and very openly because we can't when we're in it. And I want people to know that you can. You can get to a place where you can talk about it and when you don't have an emotional charge, but you definitely have to go through the work. And we do that by uniting together. Fear isolates, love brings us together. So that's what today's about. It's all about love.
You were the victim of a sexual assault. What happened and how did that affect these altars and as a way of coping with that?
The interesting thing about that incident was the altar that I lived most in was this, hard, tough. I would wear a black wig because I was trying to put off this tough exterior to the world. Blonde hair was not safe enough, so I would wear black wigs a lot, and I would kind of put off this very masculine air. It was definitely a very defined altar that I existed in for most of this early period, especially being out here in Los Angeles and being subjected to a lot of things I was subjected to, including the group that I was in, where I met this person who would go on to assault me in my apartment. I just laid there and my body froze and shut down and I did nothing. And that was the hardest thing for me to cope with. It actually sent me deeper into disassociation, I believe, looking back in hindsight.
But it didn't trigger any of the childhood memories. It just drove you and them deeper.
Yes, sir.
And that tough persona, that tough altar, is that the one you call Little Anna?
No. So Little Anna, to me, is my 6-year-old self.
Oh, okay.
So I had the 13-year-old self she was the Anna I identified most with.
And you say you coexist sometimes yourself with altars, and you've learned to coexist.
Yes.
And right now, are you coexisting with any of your altars as you sit in that chair today?
So as of March of 2019, I had an incident where I see a room like this and it's empty except for 75 me's in there. I had a moment with a partner where I couldn't get the reins back, and I literally got up and ran out of the room and locked myself in my closet. And I was saying out loud to myself, please let me be me. And it was this I mean, how do you, this is something we have to talk about because it's so hard to explain.
Yeah. Well, for somebody that doesn't understand it, it looks like bizarre behavior, but it is you fighting for control at that point. And there is a tug of war going on to integrating everything into a 6 and a 13-year-old. Is that what you basically live with now?
Coming up.
Did any of the characteristics, traits, and values that she embodied, did you learn from those and hold on to any of those things so you made them part of you?
It's non-stop drama.
I'm here because I want to dig into
Well,
it.
you're barely here because you tried to leave already.
All month long.
Are y'all smoking and drinking together?
Yes.
Why is she saying yes and you're saying no?
On Dr. Phil.
Is there anything that I say to you that you're not going to argue with?
Real people.
Alexandria has gone to the emergency room 600 times.
Sometimes it can be like 3-4 times a week. If I don't go to the hospital, something is going to happen to me.
My 11-year-old daughter is dealing with a severe eating disorder.
Here's her daily schedule. Wake up at 5 to exercise. Make school lunch that I don't eat. Get dressed while exercising. Run the stairs.
Real talk.
You want to force me to believe that the son that I gave birth to is a woman. That's not what... Excuse me, I'm not done.
You have to let someone else speak.
Dr. Phil May.
As she said to you, I hope you burn in hell.
And I'll get up and walk off this stage right now because what you're not going to do, you're not going to lie.
We now return to Dr. Phil's interview with 90210 star Anna Lynn McCord.
There is a tug of war going on to integrating everything into a 6 and a 13-year-old. Is that what you basically live with now?
So now I can't pull them out. Now I actually, I have the sense of my 6-year-old self. There was an incident where, and this was very recent, where I became co-conscious with my 13-year-old self. I was in the shower and all of a sudden I started having thoughts of like, I can't be here anymore. I need to die, like these feelings, but I knew they weren't me. And now it was very clear. And I started having a co-conscious conversation with me and my other me, my 13-year-old self. And I was having emotion as her. And I was talking as plainly as you and I are talking. I even was joking with her a little bit. I said, I need to keep the body. If you're gonna go away, you gotta leave I only got one of these. So like this was the kind of conversation I was having with myself. And it went into like, I'm holding you back from ever being loved. I push men away. I stay in this masculine energy. I don't let you be feminine. I don't believe I can be loved. If you stay with me, you'll never be happy and you'll never find someone and you'll be alone for the rest of your life. So I have to die. And it really breaks my heart because it's like, it's me. I felt that way, but it was a part of me that was just, like trapped. And it was like, sorry.
Was that something that as strange as it sounds, is it something that you would grieve the loss of that
yes, sir.
Companion?
Yeah.
Because, and it sounds strange to say it, but that's someone that you experience and share experiences with, right?
Yeah. She was my rock. Gone. Like she made me safe in the world. Mm-hmm. And she was the one who knew all of my my ugly parts, and she was still willing to fight for me, and go to bat. And even if she would condescendingly look at me and like disregard or shame me, at least I had this fighter in my corner. And then she just took control. And she went into hysterics, and that was when she said that she had to go away. And then I did. She, over the course of 3 days following it, she began to no longer appear in my internal world. And I really grieved. Like, obviously, it's still a little raw.
Yeah. And let me ask you this. Did any of the characteristics, traits, and values that she embodied, did you learn from those and hold on to any of those things so you made them part of you? Can you do some of the things that you saw her do?
I think of her as an individual because of the way this is. One of the individuals who I am most grateful to in the whole world is her.
Now, you say when you've played different parts, like you played a very disturbed girl, and that you were actually splitting when you were playing that role. It wasn't just pure acting, that was one of your alters coming to the forefront. And then when you had to go to another role, this split didn't want to give up control, and you had a hard time making the shift. Did an alter take control in all of the roles that you played up to a certain point?
Coming up.
When you're away from playing a character, do you prefer to be alone or do you prefer to be with someone else?
He just digs right in there, Dr. Phil.
We now return to Dr. Phil's interview with 90210 star Anna Lynn McCord.
I bore easily, and this role and this film was not boring. I had an amazing time getting into this role and creating this character and deciding what I wanted her to look like and collaborating with the director.
In a tape session with Dr. Amen, Anna Lynn talks about how a darker role made her realize all the roles she had played were actually splits.
All of my roles were splits, but I didn't even realize I was doing it at all until I did a film where I played it was an independent film. I played a very, cerebral, disturbed, strange little girl that was very close to who I feel I am on the inside.
What was the name of that movie?
Excision.
Did an alter take control in all of the roles that you played up to a certain point?
Looking back, I believe very much so. Because here's why it's interesting. When I'm around, and I've gone on to do several films with the director of that particular film, Excision, where I felt this so strongly, partly because I went from a rap time at 2 a.m. to 10 hours later, doing something completely different on 90210 is this kind of flippant blonde bombshell. There were two totally different people. So it was very, I didn't have time to pull out and I saw it for the first time. But looking back and understanding now what I've been living with, absolutely.
I have the trailer from Excision so people know what we're talking about. Can we play that?
Yes, I just apologize if any of you get scared.
Yeah, okay, let's take a look.
Can you contract an STD from having sex with a dead person? I'm a god. Go to your room.
I've got some old jump ropes. I don't think so.
You are a very troubled little girl.
I want to lose my virginity to you.
People like Natalie need to be punched in the face.
She's a menace, and it is impossible to love her.
We are praying for a miracle. Some of your behavior has been downright sociopathic. I don't know a teenager who doesn't profile as a sociopath. I'm turning my life around. I realize it's not all about me anymore.
How does it affect you to watch that?
So there was a clip in there where I'm in the corner crying and she says it's impossible. My mom says it's impossible to love her. When I heard her say that, I was not an actress. I went somewhere dark and painful. And that, I think, was what was so hard to get out of this angry, dark part of Pauline, was because of how humiliated she always felt by her mother in the film.
And when you're away from playing a character, do you prefer to be alone, or do you prefer to be with someone else?
He just digs right in there, Dr. Phil. Being alone has always felt safer. And I could be alone together when I was in Cambodia with my girls. I worked fighting human trafficking for 13 years. And when I have a moment of free time, I'm on a plane to Cambodia, and it was the one place for all of me. It was just love for who I am. And there were no masks, there are no performances. And but I definitely push back at too much shared time, because I still, that like, are you going to accept me and all of me?
Yeah. It takes time to be with yourself when it's fragmented in that way. You've got a lot of people to spend time with and share with. And if you've always got somebody in your face, do you feel like, hey, I want to go shut the door and be alone with us? Is that something you fight for?
The way I would feel it before I was aware was just, it's overstimulation and it's too much and I gotta go. Now I know that my internal world requires a lot of my attention, and I give space for that. And thankfully in the last 3 years during treatment and doing a lot of somatic experience, doing breath work, which has been a really profoundly healing experience, it's gotten me into my body. And the more I've gotten into my body, the more I was like, I don't really have anxiety in social settings anymore. Then COVID happened and I had to not be social. But yeah, so I'm getting a lot better at that, but yes.
How were you actually diagnosed?
Coming up.
One of my old co-stars from 90210, she told me about Dr. Amen, and she knows that obviously this has been my journey, and she saw a lot of stuff on 90210, and she was like, I always wondered about you, Annalyn. I just didn't know, what do you say? But she actually was like, Dr. Amen will scan our brains. Like, do you want to do this with me?
Tomorrow on an all-new Dr. Phil.
I would never hurt my own son.
Was their baby shaken to death?
I think Steven's girlfriend did it.
You believe she's going to let your son take the fall for it.
All new Dr. Phil tomorrow. We now return to Dr. Phil's interview with 90210 star Annalyn McCord.
How were you actually diagnosed?
So I was undergoing EMDR, and my trauma came through very physically, so my body would convulse and replay a lot of the incidents that occurred to me. And in those moments, I would actually fully split, where I remember one incident where I was talking to my sister, and she was trying to help me out of it, and she was her voice sounded probably just normal talking voice, but it sounded firm to a little girl. And I will never forget, I had this moment where I was like, I need to tell Rachel to give me a kind, nurturing tone. This is my adult brain. Right. This is my 31-year-old self mind thinking. And at that point, my doctor said, this is very common. There is a very large spectrum of dissociation. You are sliding onto the scale of dissociative identity disorder. And the more we dove into what that was, I started to be able to unwrap my life and look back in hindsight. And then she was able to say, you're not all the way down the rabbit hole. It is a huge spectrum.
And all of this with this therapist led you to Dr. Amen, right?
Yes. One of my old co-stars from 90210, she and I are launching a podcast, and she told me about Dr. Amen, and she knows that obviously this has been my journey, and she saw a lot of stuff on 90210, and she was like, I always wondered about you, Annalyn. I just didn't know, what do you say? Yeah. But she actually was like, Dr. Amen will scan our brains. Like, do you want to do this with me? And that's actually how that came about. And then he was telling me, there's so many aspects of your brain that what things you've been dealing with and trying to heal from, they actually have to do with brain health. Like, I have 2 TBIs on the back of my head. I didn't know about. I didn't know I had traumatic brain injuries.
Well, let's add him to the conversation and let him talk about that some. Dr. Daniel Amen has joined us, and he is a psychiatrist, a New York Times best-selling author, and founder of the Amen Clinics, which has the world's largest database of brain scans, 160,000 now from 150 countries, which is just such a valuable resource. He is the author of Your Brain is Always Listening, Tame the Hidden Dragons that Control Your Happiness, Habits, and Hang-Ups. And he's been working with Anna Lynn to study and help heal her brain. So thank you so much for joining this conversation.
Well, I am grateful to be here.
This dissociative identity disorder almost always is comorbid with other things, anxiety, depression, PTSD. Almost always follows on the heels of childhood trauma.
Almost always.
So what are the neurological aspects to this for her, and at what point did the neurological aspects kick into this?
Well, whenever you're under stress, whenever you're under chronic stress, it actually changes the brain and can damage the brain. And we did a study called SPEC that looks at blood flow and activity. It looks at how the brain works. When I looked at her brain, her frontal lobes were really low in activity. And the frontal lobes, think of it as your supervisor. It watches you. And in the DID patients, or the multiples that I've scanned, they almost all have sleepy frontal lobes. So less activity, less blood flow, which makes it easier to shift. And as we strengthen her brain, as we improve how it functions, she's actually going to have more control over her thoughts, over her feelings, and her behaviors.
But has there been damage that she has to overcome with some of the protocols that you use to repair the brain?
So absolutely, and so many people who have emotional trauma in the past, they don't report the physical trauma that went along with that. So whether it's being thrown against a wall, being punched, being hit, being pushed down a flight of stairs, and that often gets overlooked. And so someone can go to psychotherapy for years and years, and it's not as effective as it could be, because there's also a biological component. And if you don't look, how would you ever know?
Do you know when your brain injuries happened? Are these distinct times that you know of?
Coming up.
This was a situation where you experienced memories that were locked off for 25 plus years. Was it like they had happened yesterday, or were they like distant memories for you?
I'm Robin McGraw, and this is a new episode of I've Got a Secret.
With Tana Amen, mastermind of turning pain into purpose and how to attack illness and aging.
I am thrilled to discuss with her the secret to hopeful healing.
We all have this opportunity to mend those broken pieces into something far more beautiful than what it started as.
I've Got a Secret with Robin McGraw.
You are going to be stunned at what you will be able to accomplish.
Available on Stitcher and Apple Podcasts.
We now return to Dr. Phil's interview with 90210 star Anna Lynn McCord.
Do you know when your brain injuries happened?
I'm not aware of the ones that Dr. Amen seems to believe that probably likely happened when I was younger.
So you noticed primarily the sleepiness in the front part of the brain. Was there anything else that was significant?
Her emotional brain was really active, because when you experience trauma again and again, it takes the limbic or emotional part of your brain and it activates it.
This was a situation where you experienced memories that were locked off for 25 plus years. Was it like they had happened yesterday, or were they like distant memories for you?
It was like it was happening now,
right.
If I'm honest. It was as if I got in a time machine and I was in that terror so it was very present.
Were you in a relationship during this period, during this time?
Thankfully, no, not for most of it, for his sake. But I did meet someone, and I kept pushing back. We did end up having a little bit of relationship for a few months, and that was when the reintegration moment happened. I attribute it to him. I believe he's a guardian angel who came into my life for that moment. I closed my eyes, and everyone in the room integrated. And that was when I called my doctor and was like, what's happening? She was like, oh, did someone find love? Someone found that there's something bigger than fear.
When these memories are being pushed down and then come back, what's happening neurologically at that point?
Well, what we see with trauma is their emotional brain becomes lit up. And the brain works through association. So a smell or a tone of voice or a look from someone else that has nothing to do with it all of a sudden can trigger, re-trigger that emotional brain to fire up, almost like a seizure. And most people who have dissociative identity disorder, they actually end up with 5 to 7 other diagnoses first. But when the standard treatments aren't working, you need to delve deeper. And it would have been hard with you because you didn't remember the early abuse. It's like, no, everybody was fine.
Yeah, and that's difficult when you have to rely on the patient to be a reliable historian.
And your brain is always listening. There's how to rewrite your own story. And I have people go year by year. And it's interesting when they actually take the time to go year by year, what good thing happened, what stressful thing happened, it often begins to trigger those significant memories. And the ACE test, which is the Adverse Childhood Experience test, she scores an 8, which above 4 is associated with all sorts of bad things, including dying early and a higher risk of suicide. This is one of the most important public health issues we can deal with. When there's a lot of adverse childhood experiences, we have to intervene early because it not only protects them, it protects their babies and their grandbabies.
At this point, do you consider yourself integrated?
Yes, sir. I feel fully integrated at this stage.
What is the best treatment for Annalyn and her brain at this point?
Well, so now we got to get your brain healthy, the right diet, and then exercise. And meditation actually has been shown to activate the front part of the brain. I published 3 studies on a Kundalini yoga form of meditation. It's beautiful. It's a singing meditation that increased blood flow.
Kundalini is actually what I used to coincide with EMDR. That was the somatic experience I started with.
And you had talked about EMDR a number of times, eye movement desensitization and reprocessing. It's a very effective treatment for trauma. And it helps calm your emotional brain. What I love is you've turned the pain into purpose. And I'm just so proud of you.
What's next for you on your journey at this point? Want to know what's coming up on Dr. Phil? Visit our website and subscribe to our newsletter. You'll get weekly updates, life strategies, and exclusive video that you won't find anywhere else. Plus, on drphil.com, you can see sneak previews of upcoming shows. Log on today. What's next for you on your journey at this point?
Well, when I'm allowed to, I'm going to give you a really big hug and say thank you for this. But one big thing for me is I've been leading inner child workshops. So that is something that is a big passion for me, is expanding this language. And a long-term goal for me is to look at the way our education system does not support the nervous systems of children. I definitely have some hopes to make some change for children around the world.
If there are people out there that have gone through childhood trauma and are confused about what's happening to them. Maybe they're dissociating, they're watching this, and they're looking at you. What do you say to those people?
The first thing I would say is, you did so good. You didn't have all the tools, perhaps, but you have done so good. We don't hear enough that we got it right. Everybody tells us what we do wrong. And until you know that you're doing so good, we can't take that step up out of shame. There is a way out of this. It is not easy. Healing takes commitment. There's one little cheerleader over here cheering for you.
We'll leave it there.
Thank you, Dr. Phil.
I want to thank Anna Lynn for sharing her story today. It is so important because when people look at someone like Anna Lynn, they see someone that they might aspire to be, someone that they can look up to, intelligent, successful, talented, someone who frankly seems to have it all. By her coming here today and openly sharing her diagnosis, she's showing people that living with mental illnesses and disorders isn't what has often been portrayed to be in the movies, and doesn't have to be shameful. It doesn't have to be a secret. By doing this, she's showing people that it is acceptable to have mental health issues and not be afraid to seek help. Obviously, we wish her the absolute best on her continued journey to health and happiness, and I'm proud to have been a part of the conversation that we had today. I know that she's going to make a huge difference. And I really appreciate her helping to take the stigma away from having mental illness, take the shame away from mental illness. Be sure to check out her new podcast, Unzipped, which launches in May. It covers everything from pop culture to mental health and everything in between. For more information, or if you need guidance on mental health issues, go to drphil.com. And don't forget to subscribe to the all-new season of my podcast, Fill in the Blanks. We are digging into everything from how to interpret body language to how to understand human behavior. Dr. Amen even stopped by for an episode, and we had a great conversation.
Bounce, bounce, all the girlies bounce. Take 'em to my house, turn the party out. Bounce, 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 all the girlies bounce. Take 'em to my house, turn the party out. You won me 1,000 times, memories can kill ya, but it didn't hear ya. I thought that I could fly, but woke up on the asphalt. I swear there was the last time. I've always been naive, call it. Ooh, you know we gon' get it. Ooh, you know we gon' get it. Ooh, you know we gon' get it. Every day and night, that's right.